best greetings to everybody. I'm going to give a kind of overall picture of the development of Chinese economy, just a few ideas on some important trends which we've been witnessing in the past. And of course, the stress will be on the situation at present when China is taking important part into the globalized economy. This will be the items very shortly about the relation between politics and economy in China, which has been very important for defining the path of the economy. And I will explain with what I mean a great ideological cycle which we see over the span of almost 50 years. And then we will go to the integration into global economy and see what challenges are coming from this new situation and how China will have to adapt to certain new situations in the global world. Well, just for a start, I would like to stress that in China, for a long term, a connection between politics and economy has been so strong that almost the correlation of both developments are incredibly high. And it was mainly because the situation in China after the revolution was so much politicized that the politics has had a crucial influence on all other developments. And of course, the economic development was following. And here we can witness rather strong cyclic development because the path of Chinese development hasn't been smooth at all. And the cycles in economy have almost completely followed the cycles within the political struggles, because there always appear different groups which had different, the goal of achieving a strong and developed China was a goal for all the groups in the leadership. But the way how to achieve it was very different, and that, of course, influenced the shifts within the economic development. And to explain what I mean with this great ideological cycle is that actually the economic situation just after the revolution started from a very realistic ground, because at that time the communist power was still not that much established as a leading force, and it had to cooperate with all the social strata in Chinese society. So it was a very realistic, very sensitive approach, which has brought about rather good achievements in the first few years, reconstructing the whole economy after, of course, after the war destruction. Then when the leadership became a bit more self-aware and confident, they started to move along the so-called socialist development path. And in order to achieve a very fast economic development, this ideological approach started to depart from the realistic terms. And actually, the ideology was getting far away from the realistic course of economy. And it was an interesting process in which later the confidence in the overall power of the ideology and politics led to ever-growing gap between the proclaimed ideas and goals and the real situation. So actually, we start the beginning of this kind of ideological cycle away from realistic terms. And the funny thing about it is that when the problems in the real sector appeared, actually they didn't face the reality, but they thought that the ideological model should be changed in order to I don't know, improve the situation. And this took them further and further away from the realistic terms. Then we can detect a so-called culmination of this process, sometimes just during the Great Cultural Revolution or partly short after, when we can detect the situation of so-called no tolerance, because the idealization of the whole system was so strong, and after the course of more than 20 years of all kind of experiments, people suddenly realized that these are mainly political games and that there is no so much substance in those ideological models. So when it came to the point of no tolerance, people just stopped following all those political campaigns. So the model of ideology-driven development became exhausted. So we can detect the turning point with the campaign which was started just a short time before Zhou Enlai's and Mao Zedong's death, the so-called Pilin Pikung campaign, where they wanted to divert the attention back to the ideology, and people just didn't follow. So the campaign, which was launched in a similar way as other political campaigns before, just slowly died away and didn't bring any result. And that meant that the system was exhausted, something had to be changed, and then we came to different views on reforms. Finally, the Deng Xiaoping's model of rather thorough reforming the whole society and economy won, and as it started to be implemented, we can see that the cycles and ideological cycles again turned the trend back down. And in the process, because we saw there were several different, mainly two different options for the path of reforms. One was more radical, more liberal, and the other one was more cautious, more conservative. That means whether the reforms should proceed very fast or more cautiously, slowly. And as we saw the fight between those two lines, it also resulted in small economic circles according to the situation which line was prevailing. And because it was still connected with politics, when the conservative line tried to stop the fast process of reforms, we could detect again a bit of coming back to the methods of the old system, of the Cultural Revolution and so on. But as they tried to implement, the reaction was so strong that actually it couldn't be done. So that meant that the limit of tolerance was actually falling, as the same as the trend of the cycle was falling. So there was no other way than just continue the reforms until it finally reached the ground. That was after some 50 years. In the late 90s, China again came to the very realistic situation in the field of economics and economic policy, and that meant that the ideological cycle has been completed. And at the same time, we can say that in this process, Chinese economy has changed so much that it became normal as what we consider to be normal in the present circumstances in globalized economy. So so this was just a brief explaining what I meant under this ideological cycle. And of course, at the same time, China was starting to integrate into the global economy, first becoming member of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, and then we had a very long time of negotiations with World Trade Organization, which eventually materialized in the Chinese entry into World Trade Organization in 2001. This fact gave China really good opportunity for at least 1 decade of fast, mainly export-driven growth. And China completely changed the structure of its economy. For instance, before it was a very autarkic, maybe the export was less than 2% of the GDP. With this restructuring, China became eventually the world's biggest exporter, and the share of the export in its GDP came to about 27%, which is still a low number, but of course we must regard the size of Chinese economy and the size of the local market. So with this percentage, it is still the biggest exporter in the world. And we can see that how China is already integrated in the world economy, because China is now such a strong player in globalized economy. Then driven by the fast growth, China has to purchase quite big quantities of crude oil and some raw materials in world market in such big quantities that actually China influences the rise of prices on the world market for those commodities. And of course, in the last years, China is not only a recipient of foreign investment, but is strongly participating in investing abroad. So the share of its investment mainly in Africa and Latin America has been growing, and China is becoming quite an important player. Just briefly, a few points. We know that this fast growth, which has been going on since the reforms, had an average of more than 9% per year for 3 decades, which is a worldwide phenomenon, another economic miracle. I mean, no country of such a size has achieved something similar earlier. But of course, this development brought with it also that there are growing regional differences between the coastal regions, where the most of the development has been concentrated, and the inland regions of China, which have been lagging behind. But the most appalling is the growth of the social differences, and the Gini index has grown up to 48 in the, I think this was the data for 2009 or 2010. And it has grown for some 7 points since 2006 or 7. So it is a very dangerous trend, because China is now the country with the biggest social differences in Asia, much bigger than, for instance, India or Japan or other Asian countries. And it's somewhere in the league together with United States, where also we had this incredible growth of social differences in the last 30 years because of this neoliberal model, which stressed only the growth of profits for the most wealthy ones. Actually, as you know, in the United States, since mid-80s, the living standard for the majority of 98% hasn't changed almost at all. All the profits of the growth in the last 3 decades went to the upper 1 or 2%. And this is an intolerable situation for further development. And also, China has been following the same model, so it means that there are growing tensions within the Chinese economic system. Just briefly to say, now China has become the second largest economy in the world. It has been occupying this place for more than 10 years if we measure the economic power by the purchase power, which gives us a more fair picture. But for financial matters, of course, the nominal value exchange rate is more favorable, gives the idea of the financial strength of the country, and in this sector, China has overtaken Japan just in the time of the last economic crisis. Of course, China is the biggest market with the biggest potential for expansion for at least next 20 or maybe 30 years, and is the world's largest exporter, taking some 9% of world export. And of course, you all know it has accumulated the biggest foreign currency reserves, which have surpassed $3 trillion by the end of 2011. Actually, it's 12. It's 2012. In entering the global economy, China has a very special position because of its size. It is let's say, it is advantage of a big economic system in the present world. Of course, its enormous market gives it a very special position, and China is, because of that, much more independent in following its policy that maybe some other smaller nations like European countries. Because having such an enormous market, for instance, China is less dependent on foreign trade, less vulnerable for foreign influences, and of course there are much better opportunities for investment, because if you invent, you find a new product, something that hasn't been there, all investment could be successful because of the size of the market. For instance, in our countries like Slovenia or Croatia, if you want to make a new investment, you have to take consideration of the world market, because we are such small markets that producing just for, let's say, for Slovenian market, it's not economic anymore. If you want to get the economy of the size, you should export at least one part of the production, and then you meet the world competition, and you have to take account of world situation. And China is much luckier situation, because their there is always enough space to sell all the products at home. And of course, also because of the size, China could negotiate some privileges when discussing the entrance to WTO. So it ensured itself quite some degree of financial protection. So China is much more protected against this kind of speculative financial currents which are disrupting other economies around the world. Because as I was speaking about this this so-called ideological cycle, the most decisive factor influencing the course of Chinese economic development was politics. Since this cycle has ended, we may put a question: what is the decisive factor influencing the path of the dynamics of Chinese economic development? And analyzing this situation, I came to a conclusion that since the mid-90s on, the decisive factor influencing Chinese economic development is actually the world global economic situation. China became so much integrated into the world economy that it became the strongest factor influencing. So that means China is firmly in this world as a very strong and important player, and also determined by the course of economic affairs in the global economy. It has been proven for the first time when this Asian financial crisis appeared in 1997. And China was rather lucky and applied a very good strategy at that time, so that it was less influenced than other Asian countries. And it also adapted quite well to this kind of situation that might be dangerous for some countries sometimes. So that's how China has started to adapt to this world financial system. And then another aspect is, if we look from the perspective of this neoliberal system of economy, which has been imposed to the rest of the world by the United States as the model that at that time the most suited and it enabled another decade of fast growth for American economy. That was the time when Keynesian economy proved to be insufficient and a new model had to be found. But in this situation, we are having we are facing a kind of anomaly, because in previous world economic system, it was always the most developed country that was the biggest creditor of the rest of the world. But this situation has completely changed, as the United States, as still the strongest economy in the world, is actually the most indebted nation. But it is not such a harm for the United States themselves, because they can borrow in their own currency. So they have a very privileged situation that no other country could dream about. But still, imposing this kind of system, it has been shown that actually the most suitable for this kind of model on the stage of global economy were actually China and partly India. because they were of a very big size, which gave them certain privileges, they had already rather sophisticated and developed technological level of technology and education, and still very low prices of labor. And with the opening of the world markets, it gave them a very, very good position. So they became actually the most successful players in this span of world development. And because of the Chinese size of its financial protection, when this world economic crisis appeared, actually in the first stage, China was not that much affected because China was well protected in the field of this kind of financial disturbances. And the crisis in China appeared only when it was transferred into the real sector, when its export markets started to shrink, and it couldn't continue the fast expansion of export, which has been driving the Chinese fast economic growth for the last 20 years. We can say that actually this was a model, export-driven model, because the biggest share of the increase of the economy was actually brought about with even much higher rise of the dynamics of the growth of exports. But what happened in the crisis? Actually, China could not continue this kind of export dynamics and had to readjust, because China needs fast economic growth, at least 7% growth. Even Chinese economists calculate that 6 or 7% is some kind of limit which has to be achieved unless there could be a danger of some social unrest. So the leadership is very sensitive about ensuring at least this much of economic growth. But since the exports were suddenly closing, China had to substitute it with more purchases on domestic market. And the special situation it happened in China was that the only way they could increase the domestic spending was by increasing the investments. Because China still doesn't have a fully developed social security system, so increasing the wages to lower income strata and middle income strata doesn't show up in the increase of demand in the domestic market, because most of those increase would go for savings because of certain insecurities like payments for education of children, or marriage, or retirement, or disease. So actually China cannot directly influence the domestic consumption. So the only means is that they increase the investment, which is driven by the government-supported institutions, of course the government, and also the local governments, which all take part, and it went mainly into increase investment into infrastructure and into housing. Well, here we can see also what were some results of this economic crisis. Suddenly, about 25 million workers, this kind of low-paid workers, which came from a rural part and were working in special economic zones, mainly around Canton, suddenly lost job and went home. But the situation in China improved that much that when there was a need to hire them back, actually they didn't go. Because for the same kind of payment or same level, they could find something somewhere near home. And of course, they would go only back to those factories only for much higher wages or for much better living situation. So it happened that in 2011, China for the first time experienced a lack of cheap labor. So there will be no more those kind of easy times with this most cheap labor, which allows good competition in the world market for very labor-intensive industries. These times are gone, because now it's much lucrative investment in those branches in countries which have lower cost of labor, like Bangladesh, Vietnam, Indonesia. So China will have to restructure. It has to restructure into a higher technical value branches, and it will have to restructure its export industries. Now let us have a short look at those diagrams, which the first one show the structure of Chinese labor force. We can see that this red column is the working force in the agriculture, which is still the biggest. And that means that still around 50% of Chinese population is living in the countryside. And the rate of urbanization is roughly 1% of population a year, so it means that China has to move around 12, 13 million of people each year from the villages into cities and urbanize them. And if we compare this with the countries on a similar, let's say, semi-developed economies like Mexico or some others, we see that China has much bigger share of population in the countryside. The average for the similarly developed countries would be somewhere 25 to 30% in the countryside. So China has here a big reserve that it can continue with this urbanization process, which by itself brings the increase of demand on the local market. As you see, the agriculture is still the least productive, because more than 40% of the workforce produce something like 10% of the GDP. The amount of GDP in the industry hasn't much changed, because industry used to be the strongest part of economy even before, and the growth has been following more or less the dynamics of the whole economy. So this percentage hasn't changed much, but we can see an enormous change within the services, which have been almost negligible in the first decades, and they have been growing very, very fast the last decades. And just one more macroeconomic indicator, which shows the consumption side of the GDP. And here we can also observe a few interesting things. One is the really high proportion of investment, which has been above 40% since 2002, And according to, I don't know, normal economic theories, such high percentages could not last for a very long time. But China has proved that it can, because these very high proportions have been there for more than a decade, and in the time of this world financial crisis, when China had to bolster the local consumption, we can see an even higher increase in investment, which reached some 54% of GDP in 2011. It was slightly less in the next year, 2012, but still around 50%, which is an enormous proportion. The problem is what I mentioned before, that they can't directly influence the domestic consumption, and here it is the structural problem, because this gray column, which shows the domestic consumption, actually the relative part of it has been falling for quite some time, and only has been stabilized at some 36% in the last 3 years. China is making huge endeavor to change this trend, but it's not a very simple thing, and it can't be done overnight. For instance, if you want to build a social security system for all social strata, this is a project which must take at least 7 or 8 years or more. It can't be done over a year or two. And here, if we make a comparison with relatively similarly developed countries, which see that the proportion of local consumption in China is unproportionately low comparing to the countries like, let's say, Russia, Brasilia, India, where this percentage would be around 60%. Of course, if China succeeds in restructuring its economy and society and starts to increase the share of this, that will be the right way for the future development. Because we can see the net export, this column has been the most important, because it has been for instance, it has been showing for more than 3/4 of all the increase of the economic growth. And while this category is now shrinking because of the change export markets in the world, China will have to find a way how to more stabilize the growth of domestic markets. So this is a very important task of which the Chinese leadership is well aware for quite a long time, but still bringing it to a successful result is a very, very difficult task with which the new leadership will have to face somehow. So if I just summarize a few of those situations which are challenging at the moment, China sometimes faces problems of overheated economy, because the growth above 8% is not very healthy, because it brings secondary effects, and the most of that increased growth, about, let's say, 9%, would finally be turned into inflation and would be harmful. Then enormous challenges from the pollution and China has been aware of this problem for several years and has achieved quite good results on several sectors, but in an overall situation, it's still a very, very difficult task to fulfill. And then this investment, the trend of investment, which I have been speaking before, will have to certainly be balanced with the domestic consumption. And on the other side, the problem of inflation will have to be tackled, because the inflation is mainly shown in the sector of agricultural products and food. And this is socially very sensitive item, affecting this kind of lower and middle income strata. Then another problem is also the growing balloon of the real estate sector, because partly this push for more investment is driven by local governments, which would like to present a good picture of economic growth and investment, and they are forcing, actually, or stimulating more and more building of new flats. But the flats are became the items of speculation, and prices have been growing so fast that actually at the moment those who need new flats can't afford them, because mainly they are bought by the very, very wealthy people as a kind of security investment. And if you drive through Shanghai, several suburbs, you can sometimes drive for 10 minutes through nice suburbs of villas, and everything is empty. I had one, there was one report on the city of Wuhan from last year or 2 years ago, when they had 800,000 unsold apartments and have been building tens of thousands of new ones. So just imagine the proportions of this real estate balloon, but because these are rather speculative investment into real estate sector, which has been very promising for a long time. A lot of speculative capital is connected here, and through political and other collections, they keep prices unreasonably high. The market doesn't bring them down. So this is also a problem which will be very in the very focus of the new leadership, this kind of pending real estate bubble. I think I've more than used up my time, so I apologize for this. I will finish with this last picture where you can just read a few.
You can continue.
And I am ready to answer some, if there are some questions.
If you want, you can continue and finish this part.
No, it's just a few musts that China is facing with, like greater importance to the growth of domestic market, which I have explained. It is a necessity, because the export-driven model of growth has been exhausted. So China has to restructure and find a new model to ensure rather fast economic growth. Here, the main point will be how to change the domestic market, that it will be expanding for another 2 or 3 decades. The best way is to diminish social differences, broaden the middle classes, which will be ever better consumers and will ensure a growing domestic market together with the process of urbanization, which will make the numbers of those middle strata stronger. So, connected with this is the building of social security system, and of course consolidation of real estate market. I expect that the prices will eventually have to fall, or that the state will intervene into the pricing policy, somehow enabling those who are moving into cities to get new flats under better conditions, and somehow solving this problem. And of course, all this will have to go with diminishing the social differences, I think. And in the global economy, China should play a stronger role in the monetary system, but here are some situations which at the moment somehow disrupt the normal functioning of the world monetary system, because the United States has still too bigger share. The dollar is still occupying much too bigger share of the world money, which is giving a special privilege to the United States. Because let's say only 1/3 of dollars are circulating within the United States economy, and 2/3 are in the world economy. And now imagine if United States devalue by the value of dollar by half. Immediately half of their debts disappear. Then China will be more and more growing player in the world as a world investor, especially in Asia and Africa and Latin American markets. And of course, labor-intensive production won't be attractive anymore, so it will have to be changed with more productive branches. And of course, in connection with this, also the export industries will have to be restructured. And China is already exporting more than half of its export is in the higher technological branches, but of course this will have to be even more increased. So this is about.
Okay. I want to thank you, Professor Saje, for the very interesting presentation of the macroeconomic situation in China. Ako imate nekakvih pitanja, možete ih, profesor zapravo iznimno dobro govori hrvatski i ja sam mislio da će na hrvatskom pričati, ali budući imamo goste iz Kine, Danske, Velike Britanije, pretpostavljam da se zato profesor odlučio za engleski. Ako imate bilo kakvih pitanja, slobodno ih možete postaviti na hrvatskom bez problema.
Može.
Evo, gospodin. Možete odgovoriti na hrvatsko, možete. Da.
Boris Belamarić iz firme Telefon. Da li, prvo zahvaljujem se na iscrpnom izlaganju. Hvala vam na ovom izlaganju koje je bilo jako korisno. Moje pitanje je da li to znači da u nekom sljedećem kratkoročnom razdoblju možemo očekivati da kineske izvozne cijene ostaju iste ili čak da se smanjuju zbog situacije koja im je trenutno u zemlji.
Sad teško očekujem da će se smanjivati cijene baš zbog toga jer će i njima troškovi da rastu, a uz to ide i to da je još uvijek juan je nekoliko precijenjen. I to je jedan od onih, or maybe I should answer in English so that everybody could follow. I don't think that export prices will be falling because the costs will be growing for Chinese products. It is more important that there be stronger supply of more technologically advanced products. And another aspect of the export prices is also the relation of currencies. At the moment, the Chinese currency, the renminbi, the yuan, is still a bit overpriced, but they cannot change that at the moment. It is slowly adjusting. So the value of on the longer range, the value of yuan will be growing, but it cannot be done overnight because many of those old export industries are still rather old-fashioned and not very productive. So without the stimulus of the currency policy, they won't be competitive in the world markets, and that would ruin a huge sector of Chinese export economy. So they can't adjust it as fast as maybe some other countries would like. And on the other side, China is still not ready to begin or to start the so-called outside convertibility. China is in no position to put its own currency into open financial markets because within the present financial system, which is really unstable, it could be disastrous. And of course, the Chinese are well aware of this, so they have rather protective monetary and financial policy, and which can enable them to keep a slightly unrealistic value of their currency. For instance, I mean, it would be a very good situation for world economy if big economies like China and Japan would enter the world monetary system. It would be much more balanced if each country would participate in the world currency system with the, let's say, pondering it to the strength of its own economy. But even Japan is still not prepared to do them, and even less China. I just say hypothetically, if China would decide to make it completely outside convertible and allow that Chinese currency would quote on the world market financial markets, at the moment where there is no big safe investment fields, so much of speculative capital would run into yuan that actually it won't just bring the price to the real value, but would inflate it much more over the normal price. And this would be completely unacceptable for China because it would ruin its export. So China, at the present situation, it is not in a position to fully enter the world monetary system, and because of that, they are giving more stress on strengthening the role of internationally monetary fund, so that the international monetary fund would participate with a bigger share into the world currency, which would be then backed by this kind of new developing economies. So it is a more indirect way in which China is trying to bring about more stable monetary global situation.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much. We heard many times in your lesson about the investment. It seems like much easier to come to China as an investor than to invite or make Chinese come to Europe, especially to Croatia, with their investments. What do you think could be Croatian expectations in that direction at the range of small and middle-ranged enterprises?
You mean for Croatian investment in China?
No, for Chinese investment in Croatia, not on the local, not on the government, on the state level, but on the small and the middle-range enterprises. Thank you very much.
Well, China is more and more active as a foreign investor, and it is eager to enter the European markets as well. It's the problem within all the regulations and complicated formalities which are present, especially in the European Union, but also in other European countries, that actually prevent the Chinese to enter in an easy way. That's why they are much more present in Africa, in Latin America, when those formalities are not that difficult. Usually it's enough if you bring enough money and there is a good project, and things could be solved rather fast and simple. In Europe, many things are so complicated, and also China, it is far away and sometimes a little bit different mentality or way of doing business, and this, they are not so much used to our systems, and that's why it creates even bigger problems. But of course they are trying to, and because they would like to have a few successful projects on which they will learn how to enter European markets. So I think the possibilities exist, because there is quite a strong orientation in China itself. And also sometimes even the private investors, they are very dynamic and seeking opportunities.
Thank you. Ima li još pitanja kojim slučajem? Ja bih postavio jedno pitanje. Can you tell us...
I'll put my question on Croatian language because official translators are here, so no any need to speak English. Anyway, pitanje bi postavio vezano za ovaj balon o kojem ste govorili, koji se tiče nekretnina. Naime, osobno sam posljednje 2 godine išao u Kinu, bio sam u jednoj provinciji Anhui, kod grada Hefei, i imao sam prigodu vidjeti cijele blokove, ovo o čemu ste vi pričali, nenaseljenih stanova, koji su navečer kad nema svjetla izgledali naprosto stravično, cijele te gradske četvrti. Ono što sam čuo tamo, a što me zanima u stvari, pitanje strukture, tko je u stvari u te stanove investirao i koliko je u stvari država i vlada uključena u to. Naime, jesu li to bankari, je li to država, da li je to javno-privatno partnerstvo i koliki je tu prostor, o čemu se u Kini dosta govori, a mislim ovdje se o tome baš nije govorilo, a mislim da bi trebali isto neke stvari reći, jer i mi kao Hrvatska smo imali taj problem i još uvijek ga imamo, prostora za korupciju. Dakle, korupcija kao takva u ovom dijelu prostora nekretnina je velika i tu dosta i političari participiraju, barem ono što sam ja na terenu čuo. Koliki je to prostor upravo zbog čega ti stanovi i cijene ne padaju? Ne znam koliko znadete o toj strukturi ulaganja i tome i koliko se to može odraziti na ekonomiju.
Yes, I fully understand your question. The problem is that these things are not that transparent. There is some point in that the local governments are actually stimulating this kind of investment, and they, because of their strong position, they are making pressure on the banks to loan to those investors. And also the officials and investors are somehow interconnected with all kind of interests and of course also corruption. And that's why it is very difficult to get a kind of realistic insight of, and because let's say there is also problem in the banking system because of really strong support to this kind of investment, which could be very dangerous if the loans are not repaid, then the banks are becoming insolvent. So there are some estimations that the indebtedness of local communities is really, really big, but no one knows the figures. On the other side, China, with these enormous foreign currency reserves, is in a slightly better situation to tackle if something really appears as a kind of local financial crisis, because it can always use part of those foreign currency reserves to cover this. But as I said, we can't speak about more exact figures because they are unknown. And but it's all, there are many things are connected. Sometimes it's the speculative capital which is investing into housing because the profits used to be highest in this sector. Now the prices have been rising so fast, and then expectations. And then when it suddenly stopped, they were so much connected with the local structures and others and with banks so that they can influence that actually the prices don't fall. The government has been pressing, but they only succeeded to make a slight readjustment, let's say 10% when the prices went down, but it's far not enough.
Hvala na odgovoru. Ja još imam samo jedno kratko pitanje, moramo preći na sljedećeg predavača, ali me čisto interesira, budući da su ovdje predstavnici hrvatskih tvrtki, Slovenija u Europskoj uniji već 10 godina, ima određene veze sa Kinom, pa možete nam samo u par rečenica reći kako izgleda struktura ekonomske suradnje između Slovenije i Kine, pogotovo u ovom privatnom sektoru, ali i u državnom sektoru. Da li ima nekih investicija iz Kine u Sloveniju, koje su slovenske tvrtke sa kojim proizvodima na kineskom tržištu i obrnuto?
Well, I can answer partly. Actually, Slovenia has been, in the last years, has been increasing its cooperation with China, and it has just surpassed $1 billion. Still, it is the import side is stronger. The imports from China are the bigger part. But also, Slovenian but even more important are those investments, because many of these kind of firms, traditional firms, which have been industrial firms, which have been in Slovenia for a long time, have moved their production in China. Let's say more than 30 Slovenian firms have transferred the production in China, which on the other side, of course, is causing also some more unemployment problems in Slovenia as well. On the other side, the Chinese are trying to find some fields for investment. But as I said, also in Slovenia, it's the problem of formalities. Slovenia is especially, let's say, conservative or closed. So there are these kind of obstacles which are not of a material value, but more of a, I don't know, local system is so much burdened with so many regulations and requirements, and things are difficult for Slovenia. Is not a really foreign investment open country, and there is some policy that it should be changed. Actual changes are really hard to bring about.
A je li ima kakvih slovenskih proizvoda koji su na tržištu Narodne Republike Kine? Znači ne da je samo proizvodnja preseljena, ali se i dalje to radi za hrvatsko ili europsko tržište, nego da li su baš neke slovenske tvrtke izašle na kinesko tržište, ne samo po proizvodnju, nego baš na...
Let's say that it's mainly in the food industry. There have been some pate has been sold. Then now, just the last few years, olive oil and wine has entered, and now it's becoming, China is becoming the I don't know, second biggest importer of Slovenian wine. So in this part it is quite some. I'm not so sure about all those industrial sector, because these are, I know, complicated, because it's partly production here and there. You know, when you have this kind of joint venture, and I haven't been directly involved in it, so I can't give you such a precise picture.
Okay, I want to thank you